Now that we've gotten through some of the very basics of debate about how to flow, how to interact with the judge or your partner or different people of that nature, and how to find the evidence that you're going to use in a debate, the next major thing that you have to understand is the two sides in a debate. And the first side is called the affirmative. In policy debate, as well as in Lincoln Douglas debate, the affirmative always speaks first. Part of the reason for this is because the affirmative is advocating that a substantial change is made to the current system. It says that what is happening right now is not good enough, so we should do something completely different. And in this video, I'm going to go over some of the basic things that the affirmative has to be able to do in their speech. And then in the next video, which you'll see a link to at the end of this video, there will be some discussion about what to do on the negative, which is the other side in the debate. So before we get into specific details about what the affirmative does, what they're looking to do, how they do it, etc., the first thing is that the affirmative affirms the topic. They say the topic is generally a good idea. Now, there are exceptions to this because there are not a whole lot of rules in debate, but the general reality is that listening to the affirmative's case, listening to their first affirmative constructive speech, or what we would often call the 1AC for first affirmative constructive, you should, as a reasonable person, believe that there's some kind of a problem with the current system that the affirmative plan could fix. Now, there's a couple of ways that the affirmative goes about doing this. The first of which is the affirmative will have to present what is called a prima facie case. A prima facie case comes from the Latin phrase meaning at first glance. Basically, at first glance, is there enough evidence to present that the status quo or the current system is guilty, that there's a problem with it being guilty, and that there's a solution that the affirmative is advocating for that could fix the problem. That solution that they're advocating for is called a plan. And there's going to be a video later that you'll be able to watch talking about the exact parts of the plan. But to understand, it's basically saying there's something that's bad happening and we have a solution to that. The plan then is advocated in the first speech, and the rest of the debate follows based on the focus that the affirmative advocates coming out of the first affirmative constructive speech. Two things that are unique about the affirmative speaking positions are that the affirmative will always speak first. They'll always be the first team or first person to get up and say words about why the topic is a good idea. And they also get to speak last. They get to wrap up the debate. And in a lot of ways, this, from a communication standpoint, is a great advantage that the affirmative has. It's the notion of primacy and recency. It's the reasons that we remember the first thing we ever hear and the last thing that we ever hear. It's the reason that you can probably remember what you just did before watching this video. And if I really asked you, you could probably remember your first date, or your first day of high school, or your first day of college, or your first whatever. But a lot of the things in between get mixed up. The affirmative gets to speak first and last, which gives them a lot of structural advantages. They also have a structural advantage in that they choose the basic focus for the debate. Once the affirmative sets up their plan, the rest of the debate kind of follows in whether that plan is a good or a bad idea. And as long as the plan follows through with the basics of following along with the topic, then it affirms whether or not the topic is a good idea. One of the things that the affirmative has to worry about when you're presenting your case is that there's something called the burden of proof. Like I said earlier, there is this notion that as a prima facie case, that you should be able to articulate to a reasonable person why the status quo is failing and why the affirmative plan would be a better solution. But you can't just say it. You actually have to prove those things. There is a notion that we'll talk about in the negative video about how there is a presumed innocence of the status quo. It's sort of like in the American criminal justice system that you are presumed innocent until you are proven guilty. So the affirmative has a burden to prove that the current system is guilty and that there's a solution that is actually workable to fix the problem. Later, I'll also be going over exactly what those cases look like, how to engage in that, how to do that. But as an end of this video, you basically should remember that the affirmative's main job is to affirm the topic by offering a prima facie case that meets their basic burden of proof.